In this task, we were asked to create a function called print quote, and we have it here on the right. So before starting this video, I have read the task. I have understood that this is what we should do. We should create this method called print quote, and then we are going to call it 2 times, which we see here on the left. So if we just stop for a minute and look at the flowchart that I have created, we see that, all right, the script starts here. What are we going to do in the script? We're going to call our function 2 times. After that, the script ends. And all right, if we have a function call, we should somewhere also have the function, and we see that here on the right. So what is this function going to do? It's going to display a multi-line quote. So we are just going to display it on the screen 1 time in the function. Then we call the function 2 times. Something worth noting is that we can see that this flowchart is quite simplistic. Up until now, while learning programming, when I've done my flowcharts, I have been a little bit more explicit about what we are doing, but I'm going to try to transition to more show the flow of the program, which is the intention of a flowchart. You should not go into the details. Instead, you should try to describe how the program flows. So we're going to try to transition into that now that we have a better understanding of the individual small parts of programming, like for example how to create a loop or how to create an if statement. But now that we have this, let's start by creating a new script. And now that we have our script, let's see what we need to do. We need to create this method first so that we later on can call it. All right, so let's start there. And here we are meant to display a multi-line quote. I think I will do it by using several print statements here, 1 per line. You could do it in different ways, but I think this is the approach that I'm going to use here. And here is my quote. A talkie sheep, show me the code, from Linus Torvalds, which is quite famous in our part of the woods. He is the person who created the Linux kernel and also the software Git, which you will run into a little bit later in your education. All right, so here we have our function print quote, which displays a multi-line quote, and we have 2 lines here. So all right, now let's see if we can actually call this function. And if we stop and take a look at what we have done, we can see that, all right, to create a function, we use the def keyword and then we give it a name. And then we have the parameters telling that in this case, there is no parameters. There is nothing in here. If this function were to take parameters, they would be in here within the parentheses. But there are none, so there are no parameters to this function. Then we can see that we have a colon to say that, all right, here it starts, and the instructions inside the method should be indented. So they are indented to show that, all right, these 2, they belong to this function. And we see that after that, we go back to our normal indentation, meaning that, all right, the function has ended. And to call it, we write its name and then we add the parentheses. So let's try to run it and see what happens. And we can see that it is printed 2 times. So if we take a look at the flow of the code, what happens is that we start here and Python sees that, all right, I'm gonna call a function. Then it transfers in here, print these two lines, and when finished with that, returning to the next instruction, our second call to our function. When it sees this, it jumps back, does this again. When it's finished, it returns, and there is nothing more to do. So from this, what we need to remember is that, all right, we can define our own functions, and we can call those functions by giving their name and using the parentheses. So we should remember how to write functions and how to call them.